An actual airplane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
It looked like it bounced off the building, and then I just saw a huge ball of fire on top.
Right. Oh my God! Another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it.
I can't believe this shit is happening. I really can't.
Whoever was piloting that plane was aiming for the Pentagon.
Let's go. Let's go. Come on. We're not playing around here. Let's go.
Let's get out of here.
The top floors collapsed down. I saw it blow and then ran like hell, thank God.
Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us.
It's early this Wednesday morning, the 12th of September, 2001. Welcome to this special edition of the Early Show on this morning after. It's a Wednesday morning like no other in our nation's history. Wednesday after the morning after the most horrific terrorist attack in world history.
It's surreal to see those pictures over and over again and to realize it was just 24 hours ago.
Yeah, I mean
that it happened.
It's quite remarkable. We're even seeing it outside our front door. You and I have talked about it all morning. Take the shot, will you, Don? You're looking at a shot of Midtown Manhattan, 59th and 5th. Normally absolutely wall to wall with vehicles and pedestrians. Instead, right now, you can see no cars on the scene. You're looking down there at Central Park South as you look west on 59th Street. Look at that. Absolutely virtually empty. A few pedestrians are out. This city, particularly on the south end, resembles a war zone, and people are walking around in a state of stunned disbelief.
Well, the task now of pulling bodies, of trying to find people who may have survived that are in the rubble. 6 people already pulled out this morning, which is good news.
Yeah,
a bit of good news in all the bad that we have to report, but just the loss of life is just mind-boggling. It really is.
And again, that picture transformation, which we saw earlier, you know, let's show you the view 24 hours ago. Well, not 24 hours ago now about 25 hours ago. The view of southern Manhattan included the Twin Towers. It was a powerful image. But now that image has changed a great deal. This is the new reality of our world. The World Trade Center is gone, and for the first time since 1973, the Empire State Building is again New York's tallest. Let's bring you up to speed on what we know at this hour. It looks like a war zone on the lower end. We do know that 64 people were on board the jet that crashed into the Pentagon. There are reports casualties there could reach as many as 800, but Secretary Rumsfeld has recently come out and said that number may prove high. We are optimistic it is going to be much, much lower. 45 people died in the Pennsylvania crash, and 157 people were aboard the 2 planes that plowed into the World Trade Center. In a national address on Tuesday night, President Bush said that thousands of lives were lost. Some 202 New York City firefighters are still among the missing. Survivors have been located in buildings near the remains of the Twin Towers, as Jane noted. Some rescued overnight from under the rubble. At least 1,000 people in the area have been hospitalized. Federal authorities have identified fugitive terrorist Osama bin Laden as among the primary suspects. Intelligence officials, we are told, have intercepted communications between bin Laden's followers discussing the attack. This morning, the federal government is open, but there is no air travel. It might yet be opened at noon. Still no confirmation of that. And the stock market is closed. Exactly for how long also remains uncertain at this hour. President Bush is scheduled to address the nation this morning. Bill Plant is at the White House with more on that. Bill, good morning again.
Brian, good morning to you. For the president, for the administration, the objective is to show that the government is in place, working, and willing to lead. Mr. Bush is now leading an NSC meeting. It's been underway since 9:30 Eastern Time. He's in the cabinet room, and at the conclusion of that meeting, about 10:45 Eastern Time, he will have a statement which will be carried live. You'll see it here as well. Secretary Powell this morning referred to the nation as being a nation at war. And if that is the case, there is a response expected, although it is not expected to come soon. We are told that they're working very hard to positively identify a way to make a response. And another interesting development this morning, Brian, there is a NATO meeting coming up. And the question is being raised about whether the United States should invoke the NATO doctrine, which is to say, an attack on one is an attack on all. This would have an interesting effect on allies like Germany and France, for example, as far as trading with some nations in the Middle East is concerned. That is a possibility that is being raised this morning. The president will also encourage Americans to donate blood. There's an event this afternoon where the Red Cross will be accepting blood donations in the government building next door, the old executive office building. Mr. Bush will be there to make a statement and urge all Americans to do that. Brian?
Bill, 24 hours ago, we saw an awful lot of security concerns. Daschle, Lott, Hastert were taken to secret locations. The president's whereabouts were kept pretty secret. Now everybody is out in the open going about business as usual. Does that mean they want to show a united front alone, or does that mean they no longer feel those concerns are warranted?
I don't think they are as concerned about the security as they were yesterday, but they do want to show a united front. And let me tell you this morning when the vice president came to work at about 7:30, they closed off Pennsylvania Avenue temporarily. They had police escort 5 times the normal number of police cars and motorcycles in addition for a 2-car motorcade or 3-car motorcade. So they're still taking extra precautions.
Yeah, so it is not business as usual.
Not quite.
All right. Bill, thanks very much. It was an extraordinary chain of events that resulted in the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on Tuesday. Our national correspondent John Frankel is in Lower Manhattan with a minute-by-minute account of what is now a historic day, an infamous day. John?
Well, Brian, actually, I want to catch you up to date on something that we just did a short while ago, and that is we caught up with a police officer, Wayne Diana, from South Plainfield, New Jersey, who is one of many volunteers who were bused to Staten Island and then ferried to Manhattan.
Ferry. We probably hit ground zero sometime around midnight last night and started searching through the roadway or the alley, I guess you would call it, between the two towers. It's just chaos. There's police cars melted down to nothing, fire trucks completely destroyed. It's just chaos. It's a war zone down there. Myself and a couple other officers from my department spent about 4.5 or 5 hours just looking through rubble. We were in the daycare center. Apparently it's an employee daycare center in the second floor of the South Tower. It looked to us like those people got out before the collapse. There was no indication that anybody had been caught in that daycare center. Nonetheless, we checked all the cribs, checked all the rooms. The place was deserted.
Have you come across any survivors, victims, body parts?
No. It's where they believe that the victims are going to be is so far into the scene, and the rubble is so deep. I mean, you're walking through rubble that's waist deep, and at one point we were going to be part of an operation. They were going to go down into a hole. They had a fireman trap that was still alive. They were going down into a hole, and then we didn't have the proper safety gear. They wanted helmets and the rest of the safety gear. We didn't have it, so we were told to back out, so we did.
Explain to me the procedure in terms of going through the rubble. How have they set people up?
Quite honestly, it's a little chaotic. There's not really any procedure in place at this time. New York City Fire and Police obviously are doing everything they can. We came down into the area and kind of freelanced a little bit. We stayed in groups of 5 or 6 to make sure that no one got lost. But we pretty much came down and freelanced.
You must have seen video of this before you came into the city.
I spent I spent all day watching TV. I turned the TV on at 9 o'clock. My wife called me from work. I watched it till 2:30. My department called me up to come over to the city at, I guess it was around 3 o'clock, 3:30. And then we staged at the Fire Academy about 7 and then came over.
Did you expect to see anything like what you saw from what you had seen on television?
No, there's no expectation. You can't imagine what it looks like in there. It's a war zone. It's America's worst dream worst nightmare apparently has come true. It's terrible.
What were your emotions as you were sifting through the rubble?
Sad. I said to some of the guys that I was with, I said, I feel like I could stay here for days, and I feel like if I could find one person just to be able for that family to have a proper arrangements, it would do me good in my heart. It's discouraging to be down there and not find anything.
Is there anything in your training as a police officer that prepares you for something like this?
Nothing can prepare you for this. Nothing can prepare. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and nothing I ever learned in the Marine Corps or anywhere in 20 years of police work could prepare you for this. No way.
Will you come back?
be back. Yeah, we'll be back. We'll go home and...
As you walk the streets, you see lots and lots of people, just like Officer Diana. Many vehicles from lots of municipalities around the area. Just recently we saw a group that had arrived from Providence, Rhode Island. They were moving down towards the site. They all say they will be back and work as long as they have to. Brian?
All right. John, thanks very much. Appreciate it. It's 10:10, Jane.
Right, in New York, hospital officials are trying to effectively treat the overwhelming number of victims. Our Dr. Emily Sine is at Bellevue Hospital with more on that. Emily, good morning.
Good morning, Jane. Well, so far the scene here at Bellevue is there has been one victim brought in within the last few hours. That victim is a 38-year-old Port Authority policeman who is suffering from crush injuries. He was actually trapped in the rubble throughout the night, and rescue workers worked to get him out.
As soon as they discovered him, that the EMS personnel at the scene were doing an outstanding job of comforting him. They were giving him water to drink. They were doing, he said, a great job of trying to get him out of the scene. It was a very difficult and dangerous extrication. We actually had sent a medical team down there to be available to assist them. They were finally able to get him out of the scene, but it was very difficult, very dangerous. He was actually pinned for quite a while until they were able to get him out.
That was Dr. Robert Hessler. He is one of the heads of the emergency department here at Bellevue. They have also dispatched numerous surgeons, nurses, and other medical personnel to actually help and assist people even before they get them out of the rubble, to stabilize them and then bring them here to Bellevue to treat them further. Bellevue will be the main staging ground, from what we understand, for any victims that are brought in. Jane?
Emily, talk to us about blood donations. I know hospitals are in desperate need. Even the president has asked Americans to give.
Yes, at this press conference, they did address the blood supply issue. Here at Bellevue, they have doubled the amount of blood supply they need so far, so they are asking people to schedule appointments to donate who want to go ahead and give blood. So for here now, the blood supply is okay, but obviously the Red Cross will handle the national issue on blood supply. Jane?
All right, Emily Sine, thank you very much. For more on crisis management now, we turn to Jerry Hauer, former commissioner of New York City's Office of Emergency Management. Mr. Hauer, good morning.
Good morning.
I guess you would say this is a worst-case scenario for someone like you.
No question about it. As much as you plan for, as much as you do in trying to anticipate things, this clearly is just an incredible event.
Can you ever really plan for something like this?
Well, you can plan for pieces of it. You can plan for mass casualty incidents. You can plan for search and rescue operations. But the enormity of this thing is just something that you really, in your wildest dreams, you don't think about.
I know you personally have spent a lot of time focusing on chemical and biological terrorism threats. Right. So something like this, I mean, it's straight out of a Tom Clancy novel.
Well, in fact, one of Clancy's novels did focus on this. One of his novels focused on a plane crashing into the Capitol, and you know, it is something we've thought about. It is something that has been part of the thinking as you look at planning for these types of incidents. The problem is when you're planning for planes, you really can't prevent these kinds of incidents very easily. I was listening to Ray Kelly, and you know, Ray was talking about airport security. He's right on target. But the bottom line is, when somebody wants to do something like this, and is willing to give their life in the operation of an event like this, or in the perpetration of an event like this, they're going to do it. And it is part of what we, as Americans, in our society, you know, we have liberties, and within those liberties, people have the ability to do certain things, and one of them is to it's a balance we strike, and we continue to strike that balance as to how much security we have, how rigid we get in certain things, versus our civil liberties.
I know you drill for things like this. I mean, there's so much that happened, and there's still so much chaos out there, but can you tell whether or not your drills were effective? Oh,
you've got the most professional, the best police and fire departments anywhere in the world. The operations, from what I saw, looking at it yesterday, went very well. Clearly the many firefighters and police officers that appear to have lost their lives, those that are missing, were doing what they were trained to do. They were going into the building to do search, to do rescue, to do firefighting, and they put their lives on the line to try and rescue New Yorkers. And all New Yorkers can be very, very proud of what these people did yesterday.
I know you lost some friends personally in this.
Many good friends.
You've spoken just in the last little while with the former police commissioner in New York. What is his mood, based on the fact that they've lost so many officers, police officers, and firefighters as well, more than 200?
Yeah, Bill Bratton and I just got together for breakfast a little while ago, and we're talking, and Bill stays in contact with a lot of the police officers, as I do with both the police and the fire officers. And it's a difficult time, but you also have to realize that these are incredibly professional people, and they will rise to the occasion, as will all New Yorkers. This is an incredible city. We can't allow these terrorists to impact the way we live in this country. So we've got to rise above it. This is a terrible event, but we have to focus and move on.
We have to, but in so many ways, life will never be the same.
No, well, there's no question about it.
Jerome Howard, thanks so much.
Sure, my pleasure.
10:16 Eastern Time. Bryant?
All right, Jane. People who saw the attack on the World Trade Center happen are telling some remarkable stories this morning. Heshi Jacob, president of the Hatzolah Volunteer Ambulance Corps in New York, was an eyewitness. Mr. Jacob, good morning.
Good morning.
Take me through your morning yesterday. When did you start to see that things weren't happening?
I actually heard the first explosion because I live on Grand Street, and I thought it was something happening with Con Ed. My son, on the way to work, was just in front of City Hall. And
not everybody knows the distance between Grand Street and the World Trade Center.
10 blocks.
Okay, go ahead.
20 blocks. And we heard the boom. My son was on the way to work, Shalom, and he saw the plane crash into the World Trade Center, called me, and we mobilized Hatzolah at that time. The first two ambulances were on the way downtown virtually within minutes. And one of our ambulances were there. We're treating the first people that were coming out from the first tower, thinking it was simply a fire. We heard a plane hit it. We thought it was a Piper Cub. We didn't realize the size of the plane. And when we got there, the first tower, we saw flames. We started treating the people coming out, the firemen, the people being hit by the debris. And our ambulances were parked just directly under the towers. And no one could believe that this is going to collapse. And then actually we started seeing people jumping. It was just mind-boggling. Either they were blown out of the tower, because you just saw people jumping out. It was so emotional I can't talk about it today, because to think that a person would be driven to jump out.
From 80, 90 stories?
60, 70 up. It was at where the hole was in the area. The people were just jumping out. And you saw these bodies in coming out of the tower. It was just impossible for a human being to be able to watch this. It's just something you can't even describe. And then, as we were treating, the tower came down. And our first ambulance on the scene was buried in the debris. Our members on the scene were buried by the debris, and they started calling for help.
They were buried in the rubble?
Buried in the rubble. Naftali Solomon and another one of our members were buried, and they were calling, help me, I'm buried, I can't get out alive. And they just couldn't get out. And only the fact that we were able to talk to them with our radio communications, did they realize that we knew they were there, and that probably kept them from, just giving up. And thank God they were able to get out within about 7 to 10 minutes, because it was the dust and the initial debris. Then we heard the second boom, because the second plane hit. We were there when the second plane hit, and we realized that the second tower was going to come down, and we started trying to move our equipment. The people coming out then were with cuts and bruises and from flying debris. And Hatzolah, within about, I would say to you, within a little while, we had 150 volunteers there. We had 15 ambulances working together with EMS and Chief McCracken and others to try to deliver the services.
In your worst nightmare, could you have ever imagined a day like yesterday?
I think that's our ambulance, possibly. That was just on
really?
TV. No, you can't train for this. You can't train for this physically or mentally. No one could train to envision that a human being would be forced to jump out of a 70th story, to choose between being burned to death or a short death. I was praying for them at the time and praying that they were being blown out. To think that it's a decision that they had to jump, there goes somebody now, probably the man I saw. Just to think, just to think that that man had to make that decision is beyond what a human being can really fathom.
Heshy Jacob, I'm glad you're safe.
We're glad we're safe, and our hearts go out to the people who didn't make it, and we'll be there for the next week or two as much as the city needs us. We will volunteer all of our time and effort. People will give up their work, and we will do this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's 10:20. Let's go on out west where Hattie Kaufman has the latest of what's happening from the West Coast. She's out in L.A. Hattie, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. I'm here at Bob's Big Boy Diner all the way across the country, 3,000 miles from New York. And yet here, like everywhere else, there's just one topic of conversation this morning, the terror that struck America. The television images stopped Americans in their tracks.
It's scary. It's very scary.
People got information however they could. Suddenly, America was a small town, everyone having the same conversation. Detroit.
This is like someone declared war on us.
Minneapolis.
It's just crazy. It's insanity.
Chicago.
I sat and watched the news in basic horror.
Nowhere was life normal. From coast to coast, tourist attractions shut down.
Disneyland is closed.
Why?
Because someone did some bad things.
America's favorite pastime was canceled. No professional baseball across the country. It was as if America stood still. Worried about shortages, drivers in the Midwest lined up, overwhelming gas stations. Many of those trying to go to work were turned back.
The building's closed now.
There were evacuations in downtown Minneapolis, the state capitol building in Iowa, a bank building in Charlotte, and federal buildings everywhere. In military bases across the country, new barriers and the highest state of alert.
Right now, they are checking every car that's on base.
Drivers stuck in traffic remained tuned to talk radio, where the shock turned to anger when one station invited Muslim guests.
Oh, God, I wish you guys were dead.
In reaction to the violence, Kmart stores removed all guns and ammunition from their shelves. Anger brought some to the street, but grief brought many more to places of worship. From a candlelight vigil in Seattle to a prayer service in Chicago to a synagogue in Los Angeles, people prayed for the victims and for America. Across the country, flags remained at half-staff as Americans came to terms with a new reality.
Do you think the world changed today?
Absolutely.
Another part of that new reality is seeing federal marshals and FBI agents out with their M16s, with their flak jackets and their bulletproof vests. It's a scene Americans aren't used to seeing, but they may see more of as security remains very tight. Bryant?
Hattie, you've been watching us consumed here with what the streets are like throughout Manhattan. Give us a complete picture, if you would, of what's going on in L.A. I mean, are buildings still closed? Is traffic unusually light? What's going on?
Incredibly light yesterday. The freeways, you could get anywhere. This morning it is also, I'm told here, they usually have a much bigger crowd. The studios have been closed, the movie studios, the television studios that are near here. I'm in Burbank right now this morning, and folks are not out. However, city leaders say they want to have a normal Wednesday. They're trying to get people to just simply go back to work. But I think there's just a lot of shock out there still.
Yeah. What about the TV stations? I mean, understandably here in New York, TV stations are doing round-the-clock coverage of events. Is that the case also out in L.A.?
Yes, it has been around the clock. In fact, it's been the network feed mostly. We've seen you, we saw Dan Rather throughout the day. Occasionally the local stations break in for 5 minutes to say what's going on locally. There were a few scares around here. Somebody saw something outside one of the power generators, so a street was closed there. There's a nuclear power generator that was also under extremely tight security. The FBI building was evacuated, and so streets were cars were being diverted around that area as well. So there have been little outbursts here and there of fear, but mostly everyone is watching New York. And the other thing, Bryant, I'm surprised about is how many people have some connection to the World Trade Center. Either they visited, they know somebody who works there. It's been incredible.
It has indeed. Hattie, thanks very much.
Sure.
The President's going to speak in about 20 minutes. We'll have it when we come back.
Good morning, I'm Liz Walker. New Englanders sharing in the unspeakable shock and sorrow of the attack on America. We have a live picture from Logan Airport, ground zero for the investigation into these vicious attacks. Published reports say the FBI has found Islamic materials and a flight manual inside a car that was towed from the airport. Maine's Governor Angus King says 3 suspects flew from Portland, Maine to Boston early yesterday morning before they reportedly hijacked those planes. Dan Ray standing by live at Logan Airport. Dan?
Good morning, Liz. First of all, let's talk about the airport. The airport, as you mentioned, is closed. It is probably going to be reclosed for much of this day, if not all of this day. We had expected to hear from Massport officials, perhaps even as early as this hour, but Massport officials are now waiting on a news conference that the Secretary of Transportation, Norman Mineta, is expected to hold later in the day. We've also just learned, I believe, that President Bush will be speaking to the nation around 10:45 this morning, so he may be taking certainly priority over the Mineta news conference, which in turn is taking priority over any statement that Massport might release today. Massport will be dealing with whatever restrictions, new restrictions might be imposed once this airport opens up. Whether it opens today, tomorrow, later on during the week, there will certainly be some very severe restrictions. And my understanding from a source is that the central parking garage may not reopen, and that would cause a lot of concern for people who are used to coming to Logan Airport, park their cars, leaving them for a couple of days or for that matter longer, and then when they come back to Logan Airport, it would be certainly a boom for the taxi cab and the limousine business. Now, in terms of the investigation, I can report to you that indeed yesterday the Massachusetts State Police did find a white Mitsubishi sedan. Inside that sedan there was literature. There also was a videotape on instructions on how to fly a commercial airplane. They were led to that van, as I understand it, as a result of an argument that another passenger had with an Arab-looking man in the parking garage. Both of those people then went their separate ways. No indication as to what that argument was over. But once that passenger reached his destination, which was certainly different from New York City, he then went and called the FBI and explained the argument that he had had. That is what led the FBI and their agency to that car here in the central parking garage at Massport. As you mentioned, Governor King, Angus King of Maine, is now confirming what we have reported earlier, that at least 2, perhaps he now says 3 members flew from Portland, Maine to Boston. My understanding is that they came in across the Canadian border, which is a very easy way to get into this country, much easier way than to get in through legal channels. So all of this is starting to come together at this point, and at this point the investigation certainly is centering here on Boston, because it is here where most of the damage emanated from, with those 2 planes crashing into the World Trade Center towers in New York yesterday, not even to mention, of course, the horrible crash of the plane in Pennsylvania, as well as the horrific crash of the other plane that flew out of Dulles and crashed into the Pentagon. So at this point, we will continue on waiting for the Massport news conference here, and we'll be back throughout the morning once word does come as to when and if Logan Airport reopens. So now Dan Ray live at Logan Airport. Back to you, Liz.
Okay, Dan, thank you. WBZ has also learned this morning that investigators are looking into a possible link between Boston cab drivers and baggage handlers at Logan. Law enforcement officials reportedly plan to question drivers at the Boston Cab Company. Now, last year, the FBI investigated 2 Boston Cab Company drivers who were allegedly tied to terrorist plots financed by the mastermind Osama bin Laden. If you have a relative on board any of those flights, you can call these numbers for information. The Massport hotline is 617-568-3100. Again, 617-568-3100. The American Airlines hotline number is 1-800-245-0999. 1-800-245-0999. And the special number for United Airlines is 1-800-932-8555. Again, that number, 1-800-932-8555. More than 50 members of the UMass Disaster Medicine Assistance Team left for New York City about 1:30 this morning. They're taking medical supplies with them. They'll set up a field hospital in the heart of the disaster zone. Many of those volunteers have worked on other disasters, but they have never experienced anything like this. We will continue to cover the Boston angle of this story, this developing story, this American tragedy. The Boston angle is tremendous. We'll have more updates in the next 30 minutes. Now we return to CBS, continuing coverage.
Back now at